Have you ever wondered how someone's need to withdraw from conflict somehow transforms into their weapon of choice? The fascinating paradox of avoidant withdrawal becoming control reveals itself in the most unexpected ways, like watching someone build walls while claiming they simply want peace. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but rather through a series of learned behaviors that begin as protection and evolve into manipulation. Understanding how avoidant withdrawal became control opens a window into one of humanity's most complex emotional patterns. When someone consistently pulls away during moments of tension, they discover something remarkable. Their absence holds tremendous power. The very act of stepping back, originally meant to preserve their own emotional safety, becomes a tool that shapes the behavior of everyone around them. Partners begin walking on eggshells, friends modify their communication styles, and entire family systems reorganize themselves around the avoider's comfort zone. This pattern affects millions of relationships, from romantic partnerships to workplace dynamics, and recognizing it can completely change how these interactions unfold. The person who withdraws believes they're simply protecting themselves, while those left behind experience a profound sense of abandonment and confusion. What makes this particularly complex is that both experiences are valid, yet the outcome often becomes a dance of control that neither party fully understands. The consequences ripple through every aspect of these relationships, creating cycles that can persist for years without anyone recognizing the underlying mechanism at work. But here's what makes this knowledge so valuable. Once the pattern becomes visible, everything changes. If you want to better understand someone's attachment style, see the link in the description to one of the most popular books on attachment theory. Picture this scenario unfolding in a downtown apartment where tension hangs thick in the air. Two roommates, close friends since college, find themselves locked in an increasingly familiar pattern. One discovers that the other has been making social plans without consultation again. The conversation begins with reasonable voices, but as emotions rise, something predictable happens. The accused party simply stops responding, picks up their laptop, and retreats to their bedroom without a word. What happens next reveals the true power of withdrawal. The abandoned friend stands alone in the living room, their frustration transforming into something deeper and more painful. Hours pass, text messages go unanswered. The silence stretches through the evening and into the next day, becoming a presence all its own. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The withdrawing roommate, safely behind their closed door, begins to experience something that might surprise you. Instead of feeling defeated or guilty, they discover a sense of control they never anticipated. Their phone buzzes with increasingly apologetic messages. "Can we please talk?" becomes, "Maybe I overreacted," which eventually evolves into, "I'm sorry for bringing it up." The withdrawal has accomplished what direct confrontation never could: complete capitulation from the other person. This dynamic resembles what viewers witnessed between Joe Goldberg and Love Quinn from the Netflix series You, where emotional withdrawal became a weapon more powerful than any direct confrontation. The pattern reinforces itself because it works so effectively, creating a template for future conflicts. Days later, when normal interaction resumes, an unspoken agreement has been established. The friend who experienced the withdrawal has learned a crucial lesson. Bringing up concerns leads to abandonment. They modify their behavior accordingly, and the person who withdrew has discovered their superpower. But this victory comes with a cost that won't become apparent until much later, when the relationship has fundamentally shifted from equality to a delicate balance of appeasement. Now, let's examine how this pattern develops and what drives it forward, because understanding the mechanics reveals the path to breaking free from its grip. The transformation from withdrawal as protection to withdrawal as control happens through a cognitive bias called intermittent reinforcement, though most people experiencing it would never recognize this psychological principle at work. Think of it like a slot machine that pays out just often enough to keep someone pulling the lever. When withdrawal successfully ends an uncomfortable conversation or gets someone to apologize, the brain registers this as a win, making the behavior more likely to repeat in the future. Here's what makes this particularly insidious. The person withdrawing rarely recognizes their behavior as controlling. In their mind, they're simply protecting themselves from overwhelming emotions or conflict they feel unable to handle. This self-perception creates a blind spot that allows the pattern to strengthen without triggering guilt or self-awareness that might otherwise interrupt the cycle. For those on the receiving end of withdrawal, the experience taps into fundamental human fears of abandonment and rejection. When someone important to them simply vanishes from the conversation, their nervous system interprets this as a threat to the relationship itself. This triggers what psychologists call the protest response, leading to increasingly desperate attempts to reconnect and resolve the conflict. These attempts often involve taking responsibility for the entire situation, apologizing excessively, or promising to change their behavior. The person who withdraws learns that their absence creates urgency in others. Partners become more agreeable after being ignored for several days. Friends stop bringing up difficult topics. Family members modify their communication style to avoid triggering another disappearing act. Each successful outcome reinforces the behavior, gradually transforming what began as self-protection into a sophisticated control mechanism. Breaking this pattern requires recognizing it first, which can be challenging because it operates largely outside conscious awareness. Start by paying attention to the aftermath of conflicts in your relationships. Notice whether certain people in your life consistently disengage when discussions become emotional or challenging. Observe your own responses to their withdrawal. Do you find yourself apologizing more quickly, modifying your communication style, or avoiding certain topics altogether to prevent them from pulling away? Understanding your own role in this dynamic is equally important. If you tend to withdraw during conflict, examine what happens after you disengage. Do people become more accommodating? Do conflicts resolve in your favor without you having to directly address the issues? These outcomes might feel like victories, but they come at the cost of genuine intimacy and mutual respect in your relationships. The most effective approach involves developing what psychologists call distress tolerance. This means learning to stay present during uncomfortable emotions rather than fleeing from them. When you feel the urge to withdraw, pause and identify what you're actually feeling beneath the impulse to escape. Often, withdrawal masks feelings of shame, inadequacy, or fear of being truly seen by another person. Acknowledging these deeper emotions creates the possibility of addressing them directly rather than managing them through avoidance. For those dealing with someone who uses withdrawal as control, the key lies in refusing to participate in the dynamic. This doesn't mean becoming aggressive or pursuing them when they disengage. Instead, it means maintaining your own emotional stability regardless of their behavior. When someone withdraws from a conversation, resist the urge to apologize for bringing up the topic or to modify your position to encourage their return. Set clear boundaries around communication in your relationships. Let people know that while you respect their need for space to process emotions, you also expect conflicts to be addressed within a reasonable time frame. This might sound like, "Take the time you need to think about this and let's plan to continue our conversation tomorrow evening." This approach acknowledges their processing style while preventing the withdrawal from becoming an indefinite avoidance tactic. Remember that changing these patterns takes time and consistency. The person who withdraws has likely been using this strategy for years, possibly since childhood, and they may not even realize they're doing it. Similarly, if you've been accommodating withdrawal by changing your behavior, breaking this habit requires conscious effort and practice. Most importantly, recognize that healthy relationships require both people to stay engaged during difficult conversations, even when it feels uncomfortable. This doesn't mean every discussion needs to be resolved immediately, but it does mean both parties commit to working through issues rather than using withdrawal as an escape hatch. Like Blair Waldorf from Gossip Girl learned throughout her character development, genuine connection requires vulnerability and the willingness to stay present even when emotions run high. The journey from avoidant withdrawal to control represents one of the most subtle yet destructive patterns in human relationships. What begins as a natural protective response gradually transforms into a sophisticated mechanism for managing others without ever having to engage in direct confrontation. The person who withdraws maintains their sense of being the victim while simultaneously wielding enormous power over those who care about them. Breaking free from this dynamic requires courage from both parties. The person who withdraws must learn to tolerate the discomfort of staying present during emotional conversations, while their partners must resist the urge to accommodate the withdrawal by constantly modifying their own behavior. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but the rewards extend far beyond resolving conflicts more effectively. When withdrawal no longer serves as a control mechanism, relationships can develop the kind of authentic intimacy that only comes from weathering difficult conversations together. Both people learn that they can survive disagreement and emotional intensity without the relationship ending. Trust deepens because both parties know they can count on the other person to stay engaged, even when things get challenging. The alternative is watching relationships slowly erode under the weight of unresolved issues and growing resentment. The person who withdraws may win individual battles, but they lose the war for genuine connection. Their partners may learn to avoid conflict, but they also learn to avoid vulnerability and authenticity in the relationship. Take action today by examining your own patterns honestly. Notice whether you use withdrawal as a way to manage difficult emotions or whether you find yourself constantly accommodating someone else's tendency to disengage. Either way, the pattern serves no one in the long run. Choose courage over comfort, connection over control, and watch your relationships transform in ways you never thought possible.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel, because you deserve beautiful relationships.